Hello and welcome to Jamie's Motion Graphics. Today we're having a tutorial on keyframes. So I'll explain to you how they work, why you need them, and how to manipulate them to get, well, things to do what you want them to do. Let's get into it. Okay, here we are in After Effects once again, and we are going to start off with a new composition. Yeah, it's just going to be random numbers, it doesn't really matter. All I want to show you is keyframes. So keyframes are going to be the most important thing that you will ever need in this program. So first of all, let us get something going. So we're going to draw this, and that is going to be our object. So keyframes are basically timing issues. So you want to put them on your timeline to make changes in whatever is on screen. And everything that's on screen can be found here in these transforms. Well, the mask has transforms, the layer has transforms. Every single thing that you can possibly do has transforms. So let's, for example, put curves on here, and we can put tint on here as well. Actually, the curves is then a little bit unnecessary for my demonstration purposes. So yeah, let's just start off. So let's start off with doing something to this little thingy here. We're going to turn off tint for a moment. We will do that later. So we're going to rotate it, and we're going to move it. You can of course do the things, let's just do all of them, who cares. We're going to move forward a little bit, so in this case 1 second, and we're going to just set the position to right over there. In the same time, we're going to move a little bit, or rotate a little bit, and a little bit longer it takes us to scale up or down to this. So what it does now is, if we play it, it will do all of these things just as we told it to. And you can create your own effects by using these. So what do you need to know about them? First of all, when you set a keyframe, or when you want to set keyframe, your first thing to do is to hit these stopwatches. So stopwatches are just left click, and they will add a keyframe right at the position you are at that moment. And that moment means where your time slider is at that moment. So if I put it over here, and I turn all of these off, if I set it over here, and I set a position keyframe, and then I go back, then there's nothing at 0. So keep that in mind, that you may have to move them. They are of course freely movable in time, so you can set up your own thing. So for example, if we wanted to have a position move to like right here, and so we're coming from, let's say, the bottom left. So I'm going to the 0, I'm setting this to bottom left, I'm going to wherever I think my end position should be, and I'm going to the top right. Keep in mind that you can use these little triangles here to go to the next or previous keyframe. It can be very useful. Also, you can use page up and page down to scroll one frame at a time to set your keyframes at the perfect moment you want them to. So at 400, if you go page down, then it goes to 401, and here it goes to 329 because, well, we have 30 frames per second. So currently it moves like this. It's a linear move, and it does nothing else. But if we set a keyframe, like let's say right here, keyframes are set with, so after you pressed this stopwatch, don't touch it again, because you will remove all keyframes from your timeline. I'll demonstrate it later, but for now I would have to do everything again. So I'm going to set the or add a keyframe right at this moment. You can of course delete them as well with the same button, but you can also just select them like this and then just hit the delete key. But we're going to move this one forward in time. So we made a keyframe here where it was in the linear movement, and then we dragged it forward in time. What that means is this time, so the time between the first one and the second one, is now shortened. It used to be like this, so this big. this whole distance, and now it's only this distance. So it's going to be faster in the beginning now, and then it's going to slow down over here, which you will see if I just hit play. So it's fast and then slow. It's pretty easy to understand, I think. So you just manipulate time while keeping the the rest, so the beginning and the end position, in order. So how do I do this properly? So if I just remove this, how do I work with this in a way that will always work? So first of all, you go to the beginning of your movement. Let's say I want to start by having this rotate. So at time is 0 to time is 1, I want this to rotate, and I want it to rotate this much. The first keyframe is made by pressing this stopwatch. The second is made by going to the time where you want your next keyframe and then just editing the value. It will automatically make a keyframe, and I'll show you how that works by going to another moment in time and just setting another keyframe by ear. There is no keyframe. I'm not touching this button. I'm just adjusting the value, and that immediately makes a keyframe. Now let's say that we want to have the position changed from 1 to this same amount, or this same time, I guess. We go to the position where our movement starts. We hit the position thing, so it makes a keyframe at that moment. Notice that we don't need anything in the beginning, because it will just copy this value, because you're saying nothing happens in the beginning up until this point. That's why the movement starts happening. Then we're going to set the position keyframe here by just dragging this, and who knows. So that's our movement, and now it will look like this. So it will not do anything here up until this point, and then it will start moving. Well, it's still rotating, of course, and then it ends up over here. Let's now say we want to wait for a second. No, we want to wait until 3, and then at 4 we want to be back home. So we can do this very easily. We select this keyframe, we hit Ctrl C, Ctrl V, so copy paste, and we're back at our original position. And let's see what that looks like. So we're going up until that point, we're going to the top right, but look what it does. I said until 3 seconds we wanted to be standing still, and then we wanted to start moving. But it's already moving from this point onwards. So that's because we didn't stop at the beginning of our new movement. So at the beginning of our movement we want to be in this spot. Currently we are in this spot. So how do I fix this? Because this can of course be fixed. Well, the easy way is to just copy paste this keyframe, which is the last one before our move. Because if we copy paste that, so we stand on the time where it needs to go, then we select the old keyframe, we copy paste it, Ctrl C, Ctrl V, and it will make a new keyframe. Now it's just sitting still. If you're still having trouble with the movement here, so if it's still moving between this, it's because these things have handles, and you can remove them by going to the Convert Vertex tool and just selecting the position in this case. It will select all of the keyframes. Just click one, it will remove all the handles, and everything will be linear again. But that was really just sidetracking. We're going to go back now. So now it's going to stand still, and then it's moving back, and well, that's the exact movement we wanted. So keep in mind, if you want to change something, you have to set a keyframe of where it currently is. The correct way to do this, by the way, is if we do this again. So we want to go back to the original. The correct way to do it is to go to 3 seconds, say this is where I want to be at 3 seconds. So just set your keyframe, go to 4 seconds, and then select whatever you want to do with it. So in this case, we wanted to move back home. And then you get the exact thing that you wanted, but without having to worry about copying keyframes and things like that. So always at the beginning of a movement, just keyframe it. And movements can be anything. It can be scale, rotation, position, even anchor points, opacity, things like that. Okay, let's say we wanted to do a very sudden movement. So instead of this, we wanted to have something that well, just jumps from one position to the other. So let's say we want from this position, we want to jump, oh, I should say from this position, we want to jump to this position immediately. So how do we do that? Because we want to do that at 5 seconds exactly. So at 5 seconds, it needs to be in that new position. So that means that the position that we are still in this, or the time where we are still in this position, the last moment of that is 4:29. So this keyframe, where we currently are, should be set at 4:29. Then we go one frame forward, which can be done with either page down or just dragging it here, or with this button. So you have a lot of options there. And then we just make it happen. So we move it to that position, which in this case can be done by, once again, copying one of these keyframes, actually this one. Or you can just drag it over there if you're not too worried about preciseness. And now what it does is it will move in one keyframe. And you can see that there is no in-between position. So from this one up until that one, there is no in-between position. And that's because we set this keyframe first, this one. So if we delete that, however, we don't get that jump because it will just move there. And it's not what we wanted. So make that keyframe. So of course, we can do all kinds of things. We can also move with the mask path. So if we have the mask path selected, and currently I have it selected at this point, which means that my movement will start here, but we want to drag it over to 2 seconds. And from 2 to 3 seconds, this is going to change shape. So in this case, I'm going to make a very easy shape change. I'm going to reset it to an ellipse. So it will become an ellipse from that point onwards. And as you can see, it will just transform up until this point, and then it's an ellipse, and it will no longer change. But if you want that to be quicker, you just drag it forward, and then the time between the two keyframes becomes smaller. So yeah, it's easy to remember. And if you want it to be longer, then obviously you make it longer. So this is the time, the thing between them. A lot of people just don't get why or what happens if you move keyframes, but it's very easy to understand if you just realize that the time, this is time. So the less time you spend on doing something, the faster it will go. And yeah, well, once you get that, you're basically home free. Okay, then what if I wanted to make a more realistic movement? Let's delete this mask path thing. Oh, there you go. If you hit the stopwatch, everything will disappear. But keep in mind, whatever is on screen at that point, which means wherever you select it on your timeline, that's what you get for the entire simulation now. So if I go over here in the middle of this transformation and I hit the stopwatch, yeah, that's not a good shape. So if I go over here, I will be stuck with an ellipse. But I don't want an ellipse. So even in the beginning, we will now have an ellipse. Oh, yeah. So let's go here. Let's hit the stopwatch. Even in the beginning, we will now have an ellipse, even though we wanted to have a square. But now it's an ellipse because, well, I made a mistake there. So go to wherever you want to be. So what's on screen, that's what's going to have, you're going to be stuck with. And if you hit the stopwatch, it will just delete everything. So what I wanted to get to, by the way, is let's say we wanted from this point to move to this point, but yeah, we want it to be physically correct, which means that we have to start up slowly, then build up speed, and then, well, slowly get to this point. We can do that by just using the easy ease, or F9. Easy ease is just a way of making sure that a movement doesn't become linear. It's kind of a fade in, if you want. So here you can see that the first few frames, it hardly even moves. And then here it starts to move a little bit, and there now it's at the normal speed. And then at the end, we can do the same thing. So either right click, Keyframe Assistant Easy Ease, or just hit F9. I can't hit F9 because it would pause my recording. So I'm going to do it like this. And you can see that it will now also break slower. So the last few keyframes it will hardly move. And if you want to do that even better, you can go to the graph editor. And you can see here the effect of the Easy Ease keyframe. It, in fact, or instead of being a line like this, so a line with a sharp edge, it now becomes like a fluid thing. I'm not going to go further into the graph editor for now. It's not meant to be in the introduction. I may actually discuss it later. But yeah, you can set every keyframe to every kind of thing. By the way, we have multiples here. You also have Easy Ease In, Easy Ease Out, which is just the same behavior but only one-sided. So Easy Ease In means that the incoming movement gets, well, an easy ease. So it gets one of those curves where it slows down or, well, doesn't speed up as quickly. The easy ease out is exactly the opposite. It's the other way. So yeah, it should be fairly easy. So you have several more, but I'm not going to discuss those. If you want to set these back to the originals, so to like what you had before, that's linear, and it's in keyframe interpolation, and you can set that to linear, and then it becomes the normal keyframe again. You can also control click it, and then it becomes that as well. You cannot control click to make them easy ease because that's F9. You can, however, make it into one of these points, which I will show you is over here. It's an auto Bezier, or Bezier, I guess it's in in English, but that's all good. Yeah, you can also set the spatial interpolation here, which is how this thing behaves, so the actual movement of this, because these are keyframes as well. They're just position keyframes instead of time keyframes. So spatial instead of temporal, I guess. So yeah, that's really all I have to say about it, I guess. You can keyframe this as well. So yeah, everything I said about keyframes is true for anything that has a stopwatch. So let's, well, I added a tint. I'm going to change the color to red or some kind of red. And if I want pure red, by the way, I can do that like this. There you go. And I'm going to edit both of these. So once you're working with keyframes, the U key is very important, because if you hit U, you get every single thing where you put keyframes on. So because I clicked the stopwatches, I have keyframes here now. Let's say I want to change to red between this point and this point. Yeah, so currently it's red. What I need to do is stand over here, make a new keyframe. So you can see here, these have the buttons as well. And because it's already the color that I wanted, I don't have to yeah, press my thing here. I just have to set the buttons. Then I'm going to the end. And as I said, you don't need to actually manually set a keyframe. You just have to change the value, which is currently a nice color green. And then we're going to set this one to green as well, same green. And then you will see that over the course of this, so here it stays red. I can even delete these first ones if I want to. It stays red, 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 and now it becomes yellow into green, and then it stays green. It's really as easy as that. Any value that can change over time will have a stopwatch, and everything with a stopwatch can be done exactly the same. So keep in mind, and that is really important, that you set a keyframe at the last position where you want your original color to exist, or your original position to exist, or your original rotation to exist. And then set one at the end where you want the rotation to end. So it's fairly easy, but I see a lot of people having questions about that. Whereas, yeah, if you just behave, or well, understand the behavior of these and behave in a way that when you do the same thing over and over and over, then you should just have a good working method. So the best working method, the only working method, is to set your keyframe at the beginning of your transformation and then at the end of your transformation afterwards. And the same is here. As I demonstrated, if you want to have this jump effect, so if you want to change colors in one frame, set your keyframe where the last frame that you want your original color to be. So let's say we want to do that right here. Then we move one frame forward with the page down, this button, or just drag it one frame forward. You can read the time here, and then we're going to set it to a nice color. I don't really care. And now we can see it here as well. We can see it in this little bar. There's only, well, a very limited amount of overlap there. That's because there is no actual keyframe between it, whereas here there's a lot of coloring between it. So here in one go it will change color. And well, it's the same for everything. So yeah, just learn to use it, learn to be very precise with where you put your keyframes. Don't just do whatever, just learn how it works first. Anyway, hope you learned something today, and I will see you next time.